In my second year of university, I took a biological anthropology course. The course was called The Human Species, in which we spoke about genetics, evolution, and our common ancestry with primates. A topic that stood out to me in particular was the discussion about race and adaptation. Coincidentally, the module took place just after George Floyd had been brutally murdered by Minneapolis police, so tensions were already high. To this day, I greatly admire the scientific approach the professor took when speaking about race, because not many of us know exactly why we let it have so much control over how we allow ourselves to live our lives. It was in this class that a phrase I had only heard a handful of times prior really hit my brain. Race is a social construct. In this video, we are going to explore the idea of race as it was created and why it still holds so much weight today.
Yo, we're all mixed up in this jiggy jungle together. Join the club, girlie.
Can you just wait for a second? I'm not black and I'm not half black. I'm not even white. I don't even know what I am.
For those of you wondering how race coincides with cultural awareness, as I stated in a separate video, cultural awareness and anti-racism go hand in hand. After all, you cannot claim to be culturally aware but very blatantly prefer one group of people to the other. Race plays a huge factor in describing demographics of people. However, people often get confused as to what a race is. For example, there is a common misconception that Hispanic or Latin is a race, but it is not. Race is determined by genetic physical traits, the most notable being skin color. Examples of racial groups include white people and black people. It is now becoming common to refer to Latin, South Asian, and multiracial ethnic groups as brown. Ethnicity is derived from the word ethnic, which is a group of people with common racial, national, tribal, religious, linguistic, or cultural origin or background. People of the Hispanic ethnicity, for example, all share the commonality of speaking Spanish as their first language. They also share a common ancestry that goes back to Spain. Latinos are similar. However, what also binds Latin people together is their shared history of colonization by a Romance language-speaking country. Asian people all share ancestry that goes back to the Asian continent, even though there are many different types of Asians in the world that speak a multitude of different languages from that family. Black is a race, but African American is an ethnicity. There are many black people in this world, but not every black person you meet is African American.
Black? It's actually pronounced Zach.
While the differences between ethnicity and race come down to semantics, they play a key role in explaining one's identity. For example, it would be considered incorrect for a person to claim Hispanic as their race because Hispanic people could still be racially black, white, or brown in skin color. You can also be ethnically Indian and be black or white. Same goes for Asians, Middle Eastern people, and Jews. And I understand how confusing this can be for people of color who do not technically look black or white. Unfortunately, the construction of race did not account for multiracial or racially ambiguous people because when it was created, there were not as many multiracial individuals in that era, if at all.
There was once a land of godless natives. They did not know any better until one day the white man arrived.
What is this?
In times like these, it can feel like every single aspect of our lives is tied up in race. We examine the racial aspect of every single scandal to hit the news cycle. We vote for political candidates based on their views regarding race and how people of color fit into their policies.
Do it, say it. You want to call them, what do you want to call them? Give me a name, give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
Who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by.
For all the woke conversations we have about race, we rarely ever stop to ponder where the idea of race even came from. So let's talk about it. As Melissa N. Stein explains in her essay, Race as a Social Construction, the very concept of race as a means of categorizing people according to superficial physical characteristics is a relatively recent invention, one that both coincides with and shapes the modern world. In early colonial Europe, race referred not to skin color and physical features, the characteristics it is most closely associated with today, but to human lineage. For example, the more common racial groups of that time would have been European, African, and Native American. Each group's lineage goes back to a specific part of the world. In the very early stages of colonization, Europeans initially distinguished themselves from Africans and Native Americans, citing religious and cultural differences. That only changed when they realized that using those specific traits alone would not allow them to keep their power and authority. People could convert between religions, cultures can adapt and evolve, etc. Colonists needed a definitive and indisputable marker on which they could base different class levels. Color. Stein explains that by discontinuing their self-identification from Anglo-Christian in favor of the more amorphous white, Europeans managed to put themselves in a category that was less defined by what it was than what it was not, which was African or indigenous. This would also go on to be the way they attach things like rights, privileges, and types of citizenship. When speaking on race and colonialism, enslavement did not unilaterally apply only to Africans. We can go back in history and find dozens of examples of enslavement in Greece, in Rome, Egypt, etc. In the early days of the United States, Africans were not the only source of labor. There were also white indentured servants and enslaved Native Americans. Enslavement was also not always a lifetime status. A condition of American citizenship for those of lower economic background was indentured servitude for a set number of years. It only changed when immigration began to rise and it became less profitable to have free labor only to lose it when they've served their sentence. Moreover, the people of that time did not like that their servants could easily become their peers with the same privileges and levels of access as them. This is when we start to see a shift from servitude into slavery as we remember it today.
It is bad to be black in Desi culture, even though we all wish we were black. You don't think that affects how we view black people? 20% of Muslims in America are black. We don't even like praying at the same mosques. If they show up at the masjid, we're like, yo, is Farrakhan here? That is the great hypocrisy.
Look, it doesn't matter who you are. At the end of the day, the very topic of race has the ability to raise anyone's hairs. White people hate being perceived as racist, and people of color hate experiencing racism. And there is no better personification of these facts than the now 4-year-old debate about Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex.
Concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What? And finally for you, a British DJ has been fired for a controversial tweet about the royal baby. The BBC's Danny Baker posted a photo showing a couple holding hands with a chimpanzee, and the caption read, "Royal baby leaves hospital." Yeah, the tweet has since been deleted, and Baker apologized, calling the post, quote, an enormous mistake.
It makes no difference to me whether or not you like Meghan Markle, but in my 21 years of life, I have never seen a celebrity of color cause such a starkly divided reaction on a global stage. And Kanye West literally just held a fashion show featuring shirts that said "White Lives Matter." I think the Duchess of Sussex symbolizes a divide that we as human beings sometimes like to pretend does not exist. Even in 2022, it does not look like the world knows how to accurately approach multiracial individuals. This is because people who cannot fit into one particular label highlights that we as a society still handle race with sterilized latex gloves. It is also why just bringing it up in conversation causes people to scatter to different corners of the proverbial room. Through colonialism and slavery, we have been taught to view race in a very specific way, but race is not the reason racism exists. Rather, racism is the reason why race persists. Slavery invokes a sense of shame for everyone. A black person could be ashamed to come from ancestors who lived their lives as property to be used. A white person could be ashamed that their ancestors are responsible for the suffering of multiple racial groups. Furthermore, there are many people of color out there who blame white people for the struggle of their own people. There are also maybe white people who have worked hard to prove they love all people regardless of color and no longer wish to be shackled to their ancestors' mistakes. It is feelings like those that cause the divide when we delve into the racialized parts of life. And part of the issue is that many of us are afraid to voice how we truly feel because there will never be any true rectification for the crimes committed since the 17th century. Because cultures collide and evolve, the world is quite literally no longer just black and white. There is no one villain in this story. Every ethnic group has its strengths and its flaws.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.
So how do we as a society move forward? How do we unlearn views about race so we can eventually outgrow the need to talk about it? First and foremost, we need to stop complicating it. And I know it is easier said than done, especially since it feels like since 2020, we have only begun to truly scratch the surface of understanding how race impacts people of color. There is no longer any room for us to be half in and half out when we have racial conversations. We need to be open and honest about the history of race, own our mistakes, and teach our children that knowledge evolves as we do. The unfortunate fact of life is that colonial Europeans created race. They then used race to colonize much of the world. We must acknowledge that colonization helped create the British occupation and later partition of India. It helped create apartheid in South Africa. It decimated the indigenous populations in the Americas. On the other side of the coin, without colonization, a lot of different ethnic groups would not exist the way they do today, like Caribbean, Latin, and Louisiana Creole people. The sooner we look at history for the good, the bad, and the ugly that it is, the sooner we can realize that it does not define us. Our shame over the past gives it power over us, and we have come way too far as a society to continue repeating history. So the next time the topic of race comes up, I challenge you to embrace the shame and embarrassment and anger and constructively let people know how it makes you feel. And it is my sincere hope that people open their hearts and listen to what you have to say. I also challenge you to take a deep breath before responding to someone else's feelings about race. Take that moment to lean into whatever feelings the topic brings about. Explore why someone's experience made you feel that way. My human species professor beautifully said, recognizing race as a social construction does not make race less real. Marriages are social constructions, but they also have serious legal, cultural, and interpersonal implications. Oftentimes, the social aspect is what makes a phenomenon so central to our lives. Let's take back the power race has over all of us. After all, at the end of the day, we all belong to one human race. I hope you enjoyed this video. The mission of Heritagio is to spread cultural awareness one story at a time. Right now, we are starting with me as I journey to become the most tolerant I can be, but I hope it doesn't end with me. If you have some insight or a story to share, please fill out my involvement form and we can collaborate on something together. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you want to see more videos about cultural awareness, please hit the subscribe button and click on the bell so you can be the first to know when a new video is dropped. How has the social construction of race affected your life? Leave a comment below. Until next time, thank you for watching Heritagio.